Welcome to Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston, PhD. Glenn has held his doctorate in psychology for more than 30 years and is also a former multi-million-dollar consultant to the big food industry and uses his experience to help you defeat your cravings. This show will help you to focus on dramatically reducing cravings and leave the diet mentality behind, so you can more easily and effortlessly achieve your health, fitness, and body composition goals. Please remember, no doctor-patient relationship is created via this show, and you are responsible for confirming any changes to your diet, health, or psychological routines with an appropriately licensed professional before implementing them. Now, before we get started, if you haven't yet downloaded the free smartphone app to access dozens of these recordings all in one place, as well as to avail yourself of a confidential community for support, motivation, and assistance, please visit the podcast link on defeatyourcravings.com as soon as possible. And now, here's your host, Dr. Glenn Livingston.
Hey, it's the very good Dr. Glenn Livingston with defeatyourcravings.com. I'm here with Yvonne. How are you, Yvonne?
I'm doing great.
Yvonne is one of my favorite master coaches, and she had some thoughts about people's reluctance to get started with things during the holidays. And both Yvonne and I have the strong opinion that it's better to get started now than waiting until after the holidays, because you could dig yourself a much deeper hole. But Yvonne has some very particular thoughts about it, and she prepared a whole thing about it. So, Yvonne, is that what you want to talk about?
I do.
Tell me.
We were talking in our meeting about, why people don't start during the holidays. And I pushed back. I said, actually, I think those are all squeals. I think those are all those thoughts that we need to refute. And then I started to share a little bit about my personal journey, and which was that I started implementing the principles right before the holidays. That's when I was introduced to your work. I thought to myself, well, if this works during the holidays, then I know it'll work long term. Then I'm on to something. I didn't get the coaching. So I want to share a little bit with what happened to me in my personal experience. I learned how to implement rules. Really, that was the only thing I understood and why they were helpful. I wasn't concerned about losing weight because at the time I thought, it's the holidays. Who loses weight? That's ridiculous thinking. So I thought, but if I could stop binging and stop my harmful, destructive behaviors, then I think this is really good. I'll be on to something. So I did, and I had wonderful success. I enjoyed the holidays. I enjoyed the food around the holidays. It was great. January came, I did not lose any weight, but I wasn't gaining. I felt like I didn't have any destructive behaviors around food during that time. I felt peaceful. I enjoyed the time. I felt sane, rather than feeling those feelings of overwhelm with all the tempting foods. But come January, there were some things that began to come up in my life that started to cause me some trouble. So I had some trouble that spiraled into binging. I still wasn't breaking my rules, but I was binging. I started binging again, and I binged for 3 months. The scale started to go up. So much for losing weight in January. And then I finally decided to get the coaching. It really only took a couple of weeks with the coaching for me to kind of figure out what was going on and get some tweaking. It was pivotal in my long-term success. But I think I could have saved myself a lot of heartache and pain if I had been prepared ahead of time before January hit. I want to share the negative thoughts about why somebody might be opposed to joining during the holidays and waiting until January. And I don't think there's anything wrong with starting fresh in January. I still love having New Year's resolutions. And I know some people hate that. They think the world is ridiculous for doing that. But I just think it's so fresh and we're starting new. But when it comes to food, I think that we can look at things slightly differently. And so I have 3 negative thoughts. We would call them squeals, and the refutation for them about why you should or shouldn't start before the holidays.
Please. We're recording this. We will probably broadcast this at the end of October or early November. And we're recording this kind of in the middle of October, just for people's references.
Yeah. I think I started November 1st when I started implementing this. So the first squeal is you can't do it now. because you won't be able to indulge. You can list all of the holiday treats that you know will be accessible. It's better just to wait until January. The food will be gone by then. You can eat as much as you want, just get it out of your system. Then in January, you won't be tempted by the food. But I don't necessarily think it's for everybody, but I do think that it's important to recognize that you can still allow holiday foods if you want to. Maybe those treats that you think are not good for you, not healthy for you, but you can learn how to limit the damage or have the smaller portions if it's something that you want, or you can still learn how to eliminate it altogether if that's something that's really important to you also. That's the great thing about autonomy. What I love about this coaching program is that you can design it however you choose to fit your lifestyle, to fit your philosophy around food. And if you start during the holiday season, then just imagine what life can be like come January when you have all the tools to continue whatever you started working on. If I had started earlier with all of the tools, January would have been just another learning opportunity that I wouldn't have had to take 3 months to figure out. So that's the first one.
That's great. And also, I always think it's funny, the idea of getting it out of your system, because the way to get something out of your system is to stop putting it into your system.
Yeah.
And for some reason, people think putting more in your system is the way to get it out. That's not how the brain works. When you put more in your system, it starts to want more.
You know, the very first podcast I did with you, we had a really great conversation. I thought maybe it wasn't going as well as I had hoped because you kind of called me on something, but it was so valuable for me that still to this day, the words ring so true to my ears. I was still battling with it. I might binge someday. I might fall into this pit again one day. And you called me on that. And to make the conversation really short, you said, basically, I'm done harming myself with food. That's the point you need to get to. When we think about binging on all the holiday food and the harm that it causes, I'm done with harming myself. If I'm going to allow it in smaller portions because that's what I want, that's my philosophy, that's one thing. But allowing myself to indulge to the extent that I'm hurting myself, it hurts to go to sleep. I don't sleep well, or, make myself sick and work up a sweat just from eating all the food. The anxiety that it causes, I don't want to harm myself anymore. Why do I want to continue to hurt myself during the holidays when it's supposed to be one of the most beautiful times to spend with family and the things that come along with it and the things that we get to enjoy that don't even have anything to do with food?
For most people, giving yourself absolute free rein until you hate yourself because you've eaten so much, it actually ruins the experience of food. It doesn't make it better. It actually ruins it.
Yes, exactly. Great point. The other squeal or negative thought is that it costs too much right now. You've got way too many holiday expenses. You'll have more money come January or sometime next year, or wait until next year. Now, I'm not promoting anybody go into serious debt. That's up to you and your situation of how you handle your finances. But I want to encourage people that they're not paying for a temporary fix. They're actually gaining lifelong skills, and you're working towards preventing damage now. This is your investment in yourself, in your peace of mind during a challenging time. And like we said earlier, how much better are you going to feel when you're enjoying that time now? Like, why wait until next holiday season to have a great holiday season? And so you're actually investing in that peace of mind now during the difficult times. You've talked about the heart attacks or other serious events, medical events that happen during this time. Can you explain a little bit about that?
I heard that from Dr. Furman, that there are studies that show that the biggest spike in heart attacks and strokes and other cardiovascular events occurs in Christmas, and the second one is the day after Christmas, and maybe the third is on Thanksgiving, I forget. And so we think that it doesn't matter, but obviously it matters for a lot of people. You don't know which binge is going to get you. It's really much safer to just stop it. Also, with regards to the money, most people, when they stop binging, they stop ordering Uber Eats and Postmates and Grubhub, and they stop doing that nearly as much. Most people don't realize they're spending at least $20 or $30 on a binge, and they're usually doing it a couple of times a week. And when we do studies on that and we surveyed our audience, we find on average it's several $1,000s a year. So really, this is a program that can pay for itself pretty quickly if you kind of get in and do the work. And that doesn't even count the enhanced productivity and peace of mind, because when you're binging, you're also having to recover from a binge. So you're sleeping more, sitting and sweating, bloated on the couch. You're in a cranky mood with your kids. You don't feel like doing that extra project at work. And what's that worth? Isn't your productivity, doesn't it equate to money at some point in some way? A lot of people don't consider that because they say, well, it's not going to happen for me. This is just, I'm going to spend the money, I'm going to keep binging. And, there are some people who do that. But the majority of people who come to our programs are getting around 89.4% reduction in overeating during the first month if they engage. If they don't engage, we can't do anything. But if they engage with their coaches, and most people do, if you keep using the tools, then that lasts for quite a long time. So you don't really have to believe us. You just have to try it. It is guaranteed for the first 30 days. So if it turns out that you're not happy with the results, then you really haven't wasted anything but your time. We try to make it easy for people to try this, get it working, and there are all sorts of financial benefits, which pale in comparison to the physical and emotional benefits, but that's what I think.
Right. And not to mention long-term medical costs. Of course, everybody's going to be different. Everyone has their own medical issues, but medical costs around binge eating, and especially indulging in the foods that are just not good for us, long-term medical costs can be a serious problem as well. So there is a cost benefit there too. You may not see right away even.
Binging slowly but surely wears out your internal organs and your joints and causes inflammation, and at least the vast majority of things that people binge on, that's what happens. And it's a slow and insidious burn for most people, kind of like a frog boiling in a pot where the water is gradually turned up, but it does boil eventually. So,
yeah. Okay, the third one, if I can go on.
Please.
The third one is you don't have enough time for the work. And as a coach, yes, there is work. There's work. We encourage our clients to do the weekly work. But I always suggest that they carve out a few minutes every day. Sometimes people think they have to get it all done right away, all in one sitting. And that can be helpful for some, especially if they have the time in a day. It typically is better if you spend a few minutes every day doing the work. It won't take nearly as long to get through it in a week. And then you're also doing something every day. You're actually working on something every day while you're going through this process of defeating your cravings. And then the great thing about the new program setup is that there's the lifetime access. Am I correct in that? I don't handle that part of it.
At the moment, that's true. I can't promise we're going to continue to offer that forever, but at the moment, that's part of the offer.
Yeah. So it's not like you won't have support if you do struggle during the holidays. I suggest people still check in every 5 days, even if you're not doing well, because a lot of times people, if they're not doing well, they don't want to check in because they don't want to report to their coach. The thoughts are still, you're blowing it, so keep going. You can report later. If you're doing something actively, sometimes it doesn't matter what it is. It can be very helpful just to help you see the right perspective of what's going on. And so, a lot of times it's just a very simple fix or tweak to get you right back on track. So you've got a little bit of work every day. You've got your check-ins that don't last very long. The first one is a little longer, but all the rest of them are a little shorter. So they don't take up nearly as much time as it seems. And it just keeps you moving forward. And then you have the support. Of course, we have the support calls. But even if you struggle during the holidays, like you don't have time for the work, you still have that access to the daily coaching calls afterwards. And anything you discuss with your coach, you can discuss on those calls. You can bring questions to the calls. You can bring the homework to the calls and talk about those. You can even treat those as check-ins.
Let me be really clear about the different pieces and parts of the program that you're talking about. You mind if that's okay?
Absolutely.
So at the moment, and we reserve the right to change this because we're kind of experimenting to see not only what works best, but what people want the most. But here's what it is at the moment. you'll get 90 days of one-on-one coaching with your coach. And together you'll work through 10 recordings in like a step-by-step mastery challenge. So it's a very structured program, and your coach will take you through step by step and look at any common sticking points and any reluctance you have and kind of help you to overcome that. And I think that by far that might be the most valuable piece. But we also have support groups. We have these online support groups. They're conducted every day of the week. At the moment, we have 8 of them. And they're all an hour each, and they're at all different times of day so that wherever you live on this round planet, you'll be able to do it. They're recorded so you can listen to them even if you can't make it. And they're not required, but it's a resource for you. It's kind of like office hours with your professors in school, except you're talking to your coaches. I conduct 3 of them. Yvonne and my other master coaches, they conduct the rest. And so you're never more than 24 hours away from getting personal support in this way. That's the piece, as well as all the educational materials that at the moment we're offering lifetime access to. And by lifetime, I mean the lifetime of the program. As long as this program exists, then you will have that. My last program ran for approximately 8 years. So that's what I mean by lifetime access, and that's what Yvonne is talking about. Doing the program is not something that takes time from your life. It's something that puts time back into your life, right? Because when you're binging, you got to recover from the binge. You're usually no good for most of the rest of the day. And a lot of people come to us and they stop binging and they say, well, what should I do with myself now? I have all this time on my hands. Don't worry, you'll find things to do with yourself. That's not really such a hard problem. It's a good problem to have. But you will feel like that when you stop binging because you're not spending all this time recovering. More importantly, the way the program is structured, we're trying to help you stop obsessing about food also. So you're just not thinking about food all day. So you now have all this other time to think about your other projects and the people that you love and the family and friends and your hobbies and things that you want to do. So this really is not something that takes time out of your life. It's something that puts time into your life. I know that's hard to believe from where you sit right now, but this is why we have the guarantee that you don't really have to believe me. You just have to try it. So, okay, I just wanted to clarify those things.
Oh, yeah, that was great. Also, I wanted to point out for the people that are uncomfortable in group settings, you do not have to participate. You can come to the group calls and just listen. It's not that we won't ask you if you have anything you want to talk about, but you don't even have to speak up. You can type in the chat, no, I'm just listening in. You don't even have to respond at all. You can just show up and not say anything. So, and we won't think anything different of you.
There's a benefit to hanging out with a group of people who are trying to solve the same problem. And we have a lot of people who have solved it and are sharing their wisdom and strength and just trying to really shore it up and get to the next level. You know, it's kind of funny because before you join, you don't really know the value of those calls and there's just thinks, okay, well, great support groups. But then once you get into it, people say, oh my God, I wish there was some way I could continue. And that's why we set it up like this.
You know, there are people that won't talk for the longest time and all of a sudden they'll speak up on one of those calls and they'll tell me, I was so scared. My heart was pounding. I was like that too. When I first joined, I remember I was determined to speak up on at least one of all the calls, you know, with you and the other coaches because I wanted to have the experience. I was determined to not let my fear of speaking up in a group that I was uncomfortable in get the better of me. And it got better. Some people are just very, you know, it's easy for them to speak up and some people aren't. And so I just want to encourage people that think I can't do that because I don't understand it. I don't know. I'm going to sound like I don't know what I'm talking about. Nobody else struggles like I do. That even if you don't want to speak up, you can just join and listen in.
That's absolutely true. You've got your individual calls for things that you don't want to talk about in front of other people. And by the way, some people think that because I record sessions and distribute them on the podcast, that means that every session is recorded and distributable. But that's not true. We have to ask your specific permission before we would distribute it on the podcast. So your individual sessions are for you and your coach unless you decide you want it otherwise. The group calls, those stay within the program, you know, they stay within the company, but they do get distributed to other paying clients. But your personal calls, those are where you can talk about more private matters if you need to.
Yeah, great. That's all I have, but I have a couple questions for you. See if you have anything more you want to add, unless you had something to add now.
No, go ahead.
So I gave some of the reasons, things that I thought, and the most common things that the squeals that I had or that I've heard. Why do you think it's so common for people to delay starting their health journey until after the holidays?
Well, I think it's common for people to delay starting their health journey, period. I think that the nature of addiction is the desire to put off making a decision and debate about it forever. Because while you're debating about it, you can still indulge. And so there's a gratification that you know that you might be giving up if you get a little more serious about getting things under control. But the way that we have things structured and the way that it works with the program, and it varies from substance to substance. So sugar versus flour versus nuts versus cheese. But I find 2 out of 3 people, if they want to moderate something, they're able to do it with these tools. And the experience of successfully moderating something is exquisite. It's an enhancement of self efficacy and self esteem because you're able to control yourself in a way that you never could before. I still remember my mom getting through Halloween without binging on the leftover chocolates from the kids. It was the last Halloween of her life, and I had coached her through it, and she was just ecstatic when that was done. There's a much greater gratification in that enhanced self efficacy and esteem and the confidence that, wow, I can do hard things that I didn't think I could do before. There's a much greater gratification than whatever gratification you might be giving up by regulating sugar or regulating flour or even giving it up. And so most people only focus on, oh my God, I'm going to give up sugar. I'm never going to have the mouthfeel and taste of a donut or a chocolate bar or my mother's pumpkin pie. But they just don't focus on all those wonderful benefits that are going to accrue. And so we'll help you with that deprivation trap and help you to focus on what you need to focus on. Most people have not had the experience of being able to moderate in these situations. Most people feel like the day after Thanksgiving is a day you're supposed to hate yourself. And everybody hates themselves, and so it's just normal, but it's really not normal and it's really not healthy, and you don't have to do that. And so I think there's cultural pressure to just eat whatever and forget about it. As much as I like New Year's resolutions also because it's an opportunity to go to the next level, the way that it's really set up in the culture is you're going to take 2 steps back over Thanksgiving and Christmas or whatever other religious holidays are at the end of the year. And then you take a step forward in January. And if you do that year after year, you're going to wind up someplace that you really don't like. I think between the natural ambivalence associated with addictive behavior, that people just want to put off the decision to do something about it. I think that it's culturally reinforced around the holidays and people not understanding the deprivation trap and how to focus on everything you get versus everything you're giving up. I think it's a natural setup for disaster, but you don't have to go along with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I think you actually answered my other questions, but I have one more thing I wanted to bring up.
Anything.
One of the things that kept me from joining at all, the coaching program, until I became what I felt was very desperate, was that even though I understood your work, I'd read your book, I understood the concept because you're a psychologist. I didn't know how this would play out, but I pictured myself lying on a couch talking about my problems, my emotional problems, and, the traumatic events in my life and my childhood trauma. I didn't want to do that. That was like the last thing I wanted to do. And I bring this up because a lot of times the holidays can bring out that kind of stuff. Thanksgiving, don't we all have that uncle? Or, that family member, or you got to be careful. Are we talking about politics? It can bring out all kinds of emotional things and whatever else is going on, family members that we don't have around anymore. It can be a really difficult time. What I found was those emotional things, the trauma, all those things that I have personally experienced in my own life, I didn't have to pull them out. They were actually already there. I didn't have to go seeking them. And the biggest thing was I didn't have to, or should I say, I was able to address my food problems without having to address my trauma, my emotional problems. And what I found was when I started to do that, it was so much easier to clearly think about and pay attention to my emotional problems. Like I never ate because of my emotions anymore, because it was so much easier to recognize the fallacy that because I'm emotional, and I had bouts where I would just like cry out my tears in the shower, but I didn't binge over them.
Can I say a whole bunch of things about
Oh,
this?
please. Yeah.
Including some things you might not have heard me talk about, Yvonne.
Okay.
What you have heard me talk about is that the program is designed to sever the link between emotion and overeating. It's designed to allow you to make choices about what to eat with your head, despite whatever trauma you might be feeling internally. I kind of figured this out after 20 years of trying to love myself thin, going to therapists and Overeaters Anonymous and having a spiritual journey and thinking I had to fix my life in order to fix my eating. Then I finally figured out that no, I just had to engage in these very practical techniques to fix my eating. When you stop overeating, you do have more access to your emotions, and you might want to get into therapy or work with someone who's set up to help you with that. But you can still stop overeating. I set this all up as training and education with very practical techniques. It's a little bit more like an exercise class than it is a psychotherapy session. That's the best way I could describe it. But there's a bigger reason that we don't address all the emotional issues and trauma in the program. And that is that doing so really requires, in my estimation, and the way that I was trained, a very different setup in your personal life than being a coach does. If I really wanted to do treatment, which is not legal for me to do online in various states and countries. Like I can treat people in Florida, I can treat people in New York, but I'm not allowed to treat people elsewhere. But it's not just a legal thing, because if I really wanted to do that, then I would have to be set up the way I was set up 20 years ago, where I had at least an hour of supervision for every 5 hours or so that I had of clients that I was working with, where I had set up peer resources. So there were other psychologists and social workers that I met with on a regular basis to process things, where I was constantly reading books in that vein. So I'd be reading books about how to help people with suicidal feelings or anxiety, or like I was really, really immersed in all that. It's not really just book knowledge. It's something that has to be part of who you are and how you live in order to be a really good therapist. As much as people say, oh, Glenn, you sound so empathic and I could talk to you about anything, I'm not really in peak shape to do that kind of work anymore, because I don't really have someone I can turn to if I can't figure something out. I haven't set up my life like that. And I think it's a therapist's responsibility to set up their life like that if they're going to do treatment. And so, when people come in, we make sure that we tell them that. We tell them the difference between coaching and psychotherapy. There are articles on the site that are all about that. But come to us because you want to stop overeating. That's what we do. We're very good at it. We're laser focused on it. And you're not going to have to sit by the river and contemplate your navel or tell me why you feel guilty that something happened when you were 5 years old. It's just not part of the game. It's just not part of it for us. I fully respect and admire and have the utmost interest in seeing people get the psychotherapy that they need, or the medication sometimes, but it's not what we do. We just don't do that. So you don't have to worry about that.
I was more open to therapy and looked for qualified therapists once my binging was under control, because I just saw my life in just a completely different light. It no longer put blinders on me for any problem in my life. It's actually kind of crazy. And it's very empowering when you know that not only can I control my binge eating, but now I can focus and take care and deal with these other issues in my life that I've been kind of pushing aside for a long time because it was too painful to deal with.
Yeah. Binging becomes the focus of your life. The gratification, the different foods that you eat. How are you going to do it? Where are you going to do it? How are you going to hide the evidence? How are you going to make up for it? It becomes the focus of your life when you let it get out of control. We do our very best to help people with very practical techniques that they can use. And in conjunction with your treatment, you should tell your therapist or your psychiatrist or your doctor that you're going to be working with us. And the vast majority of them approve. The vast majority of them are really okay about it. So, good.
That's all I have today.
And that brings us to the end of today's broadcast of Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston. Now, if you'd like to find out more about the products and services Dr. Glenn offers to help you dramatically reduce your cravings and stop overeating in 90 days or less, please visit defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. That's defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. Thanks.